The index was at 94 when the first wound landed, and senior analyst Prethson said it would correct downward within 30 seconds. She had 17 years of engagement data behind that statement. She was not guessing. I am Sareth Vaunkas, Combat Analysis Officer, Varethi Joint Command. I am writing this account because the review board's official log contains the data, but not the weight of it, and I have found that the data alone does not adequately convey what it felt like to sit in that room. The human's name, as we understood it from the intake documentation, was Carver. Rank, Staff Sergeant, Earth Consolidated Special Operations, captured 12 days prior during the Thresh 9 border incident. A 4-point perimeter interdiction that our tactical team had executed correctly in every measurable respect. The team had gone in with a 7-to-1 advantage, standard suppression loadout, and Carver had been one of 4 humans defending a signals relay station the size of a freight container. 2 of the 4 humans were killed. 1 was incapacitated and evacuated. Carver was taken after the engagement had formally concluded, meaning after our tactical commander had already filed a cessation report. He had been found seated against the outer wall of the relay station, applying field dressings to his own wounds, with the calm focus of someone completing administrative work. The board convened on day 12 to classify him and determine appropriate threat tier assignment. This is a routine proceeding. You review the engagement footage, you run the combatant's biometric record against the incident timeline, you assign a tier, you file it. I have sat on 11 such boards. It takes on average 40 minutes. Tactical Commander Oveth Ronvel chaired the session. 2 Varethi senior analysts flanked him, Prethson and Varekas. Across the table, the 2 Soreth liaison officers, Death Carr, and the one whose name I have rendered in my notes only as the younger one, sat with their secondary membranes half closed in the way Sorath analysts do when they consider a proceeding routine. I noted that posture. I note it now because of how long it held and exactly when it changed. The footage opened at the moment of first contact. Our team came through the eastern approach in good order. The relay station was a short-range objective. The human defenders had no tactical depth to work with, and no avenue of withdrawal. Within the first 40 seconds of engagement, Carver had taken a glancing impact from a Varethi suppression round to his left shoulder, a wound our medical assessor later classified as a grade, tissue disruption, significant, functionally limiting for any combatant in our assessment library. The efficiency index, calculated in real time from movement precision, response latency, threat selection accuracy, and force application economy, read 94 at the moment of impact. Prethson stated her 30-second correction window. Varekas nodded without looking up from his secondary screen. The index read 94 30 seconds later. Prethson said the sensor array on the eastern approach was known to have a calibration drift. She filed a note. Oveth Ronvel told the system to pull the western approach backup feed and rerun the calculation. The backup calculation confirmed the primary. The index was 94. It had not moved. At the 2-minute mark of the engagement, Carver took a second impact. Grade 2 laceration right forearm from a Varethi containment blade during a close-quarter exchange. The exchange itself lasted 4 seconds. In those 4 seconds, the human disarmed the Varethi operative. The operative's momentum into the path of a second approaching operative and reset to a neutral position before either operative had registered what had occurred. The efficiency index during those 4 seconds read 97, 98, 98, 99. The younger Soreth analyst's secondary membrane opened fully. He did not say anything. He leaned forward approximately 4 centimeters and stayed there. Oveth Ronvel asked the system to display the standard degradation curve for comparison, the universal model built from 340 species across 1,200 documented engagements, showing combat efficiency as a function of accumulated tissue damage. The curve is a smooth descent. Every species fits it within a standard deviation of 0.3. It is, in our field, treated as a physical constant, the same way atmospheric pressure curves are treated as constants. Not because we decided it should be true, but because in 1,200 engagements, it had never been otherwise. The human's points did not fit the curve, they sat above it. And as the footage continued, as the engagement moved into its 4th minute, as Carver absorbed a third impact, a grade 3 compression injury to his lower ribs from a tactical brace deployed at close range. The points moved further above it. The index read 101. That number exists outside our rating scale's design parameters. The scale was built to a ceiling of 100 because no prior engagement data had ever required higher. Varethi said quietly. The ceiling was a design choice, not a physical limit, and asked the system to extend the axis. The system extended the axis. The index at minute 5 read 103. The room did not make noise. I want to record that precisely. The room made no noise. Ronvel sat back in his chair, approximately 2 centimeters, and did not sit forward again. San's stylus was in her hand, but she had stopped writing. The two Sorath analysts were both fully forward now, both secondary membranes open, in a posture I had never seen on a Sorath in a review proceeding. It is a posture I associate with Sorath in field conditions when they have registered a predator-class threat at close range. I watched the footage run to its conclusion. At minute 7, 3 documented wounds and an efficiency index of 104. Carver held a doorway against 4 operatives for 90 seconds, while the second human evacuated the injured third. At minute 8, he executed a controlled withdrawal to the outer wall of the relay station, set a field perimeter, sat down. With an efficiency index of 143 wounds and what our medical record would later classify as a hairline fracture of the left clavicle sustained during the minute 4 exchange, the human sat down and began treating his own injuries. Methodically, in the correct clinical order. As though the engagement had been a training exercise that had run slightly long, the system flagged the final index value at cessation. 106. Ronvel asked the system to pull the live biometric feed from the holding facility. Carver had been in a standard comfort cell for 12 days, receiving medical care under the Varethi detainee protocol. The live feed showed a human seated at a small table, working through what appeared to be a written document. Intake paperwork. Liaison officer confirmed. His wounds were in late-stage healing, his posture was relaxed, his biometric indices were nominal. There was no indication, in any measurable parameter, that anything unusual had occurred to him 12 days prior. Ronvel said, "Run the threat tier assignment." The system returned no result. Threat tier assignments are built on the degradation model. Without a degradation curve to anchor the calculation, the system had no framework to complete the classification. It displayed in flat text, words, assessment parameters not met, manual review required. No one moved to initiate manual review. I recorded the session in full. I logged the index values, the footage, timestamps, the system's failed classification output. I noted the wound grades, the efficiency readings, the final biometric confirmation from the holding cell. I wrote, in the summary field, that the subject demonstrated a combat efficiency profile consistent with no existing classification tier, and that a new tier designation was recommended pending command review. Then I walked to the observation window of the assessment suite, which looks out over the docking corridor, and I stood there for a while. There is a thing that happens in this work when the model you have used for your entire career turns out to have been built for every species except one. It is not panic, it is not even precisely fear. It is something quieter than both of those things. It is the specific sensation of realizing that the constant was only a constant until it wasn't, and that everything you built on top of it is now resting on a question you cannot answer. The question is, if the human body does not degrade under combat damage, if it responds to injury the way certain materials respond to stress, not by weakening but by reorganizing, by finding new load paths, by committing harder to function as structure fails, then the degradation model does not apply to humans. And if the degradation model does not apply to humans, then every threat tier calculation we have ever run on a human combatant has been wrong. All of them. Carver finished his paperwork sometime in the next hour. A liaison officer collected it. There were no incidents. I filed my report. I recommended a new classification category. I noted, in the final line, that the efficiency ceiling of 106 documented in the Thresh 9 footage should not be assumed to represent a maximum. We had only one data point from a single engagement, and the curve, such as it was, had still been pointing upward when the fighting stopped. Not because it had reached its limit, because the fighting had.